So welcome everyone to the first session of the day two. Today I'm basically on a warm-up stage for you. And this talk a little bit more theoretical than maybe other case studies, but then hopefully the guys from PandaDoc can join and add more liveliness to the discussion, right? So this talk is about learning how to learn with a multi-team product backlog refinements or PBR. And I will share with you a dozen ideas and experiments that I've seen and that I've tried that I believe add some more juice to the PBRs. So let's dive in. In my classes, in my Certified Scrum Master class, I typically show this photograph and I ask people to guess what kind of event it is and what people are doing, right? And well, because you guys know this talk is about PBR, you would say, well, this is a PBR, and then you'll be right. It's a multi-team PBR event, but actually it doesn't look like a traditional PBR event, right? Like I rarely see people have these kind of rich discussions when they're doing PBR. They're usually doing something different, something less interactive. So what you can see here is that people are talking, right? And it's all learning. So typically when I show this photograph to somebody who doesn't know it's about PBR, people would say, hey, yes, it's like a workshop, right? People are on a workshop. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what PBRs should be, right? People should be talking to each other. They should interview somebody who they would like to learn from, and they work in multiple groups, and it's interactive and it's lively, and they can dive into some details and learn some business rules and some product complexity or business complexity from somebody who knows more. So it's all about learning. I'm sure there's nothing new, but then I'm asking myself, like, but why? If it's obvious, right? Why so many companies I see actually do the PBRs in a slightly different way? I'm checking the chat. Somebody is writing. No, it's all fine, right? Okay. And this company, before actually they started to experiment with these crazy workshop style PBRs, they also did something very different. Basically, yeah, they just logged themselves into a room, team by team, and individually looked at the parts of the backlog. And I guess, like, if you open the Scrum guide, like when you're trying to understand why people get so many misunderstandings about PBRs, you typically read the following statements, like product backlog refinement is an act of adding details, estimates, and order to the items in the product backlog, right? And then you can read that during PBR, items are reviewed and revised. And it's like, it is all true. I cannot agree more, but this sounds like a very boring statement, right? And if you just read the Scrum guide and if you implement your refinement exactly the way it is described here, you'll end up doing exactly that, right? You'll end up adding details, estimates, and order to your items that is basically moving things up and down in your JIRA backlog, and then you click this wonderful create a sprint button, right? And they just makes me want to cry, right? So PBRs are not about moving tickets up and down. They're about learning about the upcoming work or about the business that needs you to do some work. It's about learning something that you don't know, that you can actually create that something new that is required, right? But if you look on the LeSS website, the things are a bit shinier and a bit more interesting, not just because of the colors, but I guess if you want to read more about PBRs, I would rather recommend reading what's written in the LeSS books than in the Scrum guide, because actually in LeSS, PBR is a formal event. It's a workshop meeting. It's not just an activity, because like, what is an activity? So it is a real event, right? And in this talk, I would like to give you some ideas that I believe can help you to make this workshop meeting or event even cooler, and really turn it from a boring meeting where people look into a Beamer with JIRA into something that people actually learn. So it's all about learning, right? Okay, so tip number one, and of course you would expect that tip from somebody who's famous for this video, which I put some years ago, called jirafication, free your process, right? The video is still up there, has, I don't know, up to 1,000 views, and most people liked it. Not so many people dislike it, so I'm sure it has something good ideas in it. But like, basically, try not to use JIRA within your PBR sessions, and I explain you why, right? Because like, if you're using a tool like JIRA that has this very precise format of things like the boards and the list, you typically end up actually massaging the tool, which is becoming the goal of the meeting, instead of actually discussing what you should be discussing, the content of the work. But if you're using JIRA, right, that's fine with me, I guess. But what I typically do, I just go and print the tickets that needs to be discussed during the refinement stage, and then I will cut them into pieces, and then we will work with the real physical paper. Well, these days, when we are all working remotely, right, it's hard to imitate what I'm currently showing you, right? This is basically like a JIRA-free environment where just people using good old paper and pen and trying to figure out their roadmap and the strategy for the product. And because they are using just the wall space, they can be really creative about how they structure the information, right? And tools like JIRA are not just bad because they really focus you on the moving things up and down, but they also limit your creativity and the way how you structure information. But if you go like paper, you can really be creative. But I'm sure these kind of walls, a bit more formless things, can be easily imitated with Mira, right? So if you need to have digital information and digital backlogs, I'd rather go to Mira than to JIRA, right? Because of all the things we've just discussed. But that's probably obvious advice, but I had to mention that because, well, I just had to do it, right? And then basically in this company, we actually had a JIRA, and the guys actually started to experiment with paper, and they stopped the JIRA license. That was actually my only client who done that. And as you can see on the table there's like A3 sized paper, and basically we started to write specifications on A3, and then you can actually put them together and stick it to the wall. So on the wall you can see this specification there, and then on the grooming meeting, or on the refinement, you go to the wall, you take the specification that you want to work on, you open it up, and you add details to it. I'm sure this can be easily imitated in Miro-like tools to have a more interactive workshop. Idea number two, also not something you haven't heard of. Try not using epics, right? Because they will make you focus on the wrong thing. You know, if you Google Agile and epics together, you'll find lots of pictures that look like that, quite complex. They describe you the hierarchy of the items. There's theme, there's epic, there's a feature, there's a story. What is that? Like, what epics? And what is an epic? Like, is it just a bigger story, or is it a smarter story? Is it more valuable than a story? A funny thing, right? I worked for one company, but big German automotive company, which you probably can know for sure. Well, because everything in this company was so big and massive, right? Epics were not too cool for them. So they figured out they need another level. So they ended up having sagas. Sagas, with epics, and then stories, and then tasks. And then the bigger the manager you are, with the bigger things you were working on. So if you're a big manager, like a department head, like epics are small, you would prioritize and you work with sagas. And this is exactly where this whole idea of epics is wrong, because you should not be prioritizing big things. You should be breaking them down and then actually understanding the value. out of them. So this epics thing, I just basically bullshit, right? If you need to group something, you can use the theme, right? So I'm currently working on the user story, which is related to payment theme, and then payment theme becomes just a grouping, right? And that should be enough for your backlog. But epics, well, if you would like to use some cool terminology, which is not overloaded. Actually, I'm sure Mike Cohn was the one who made epics popular. I'm sure it's mentioned in his book, User Stories Applied. So that's probably not so cool for him to make that idea that popular. But I mean, everybody knows epics and stuff. But what I'm trying to say, if you would like to use cool terminology and stories sound boring for you, like think of stones, right? You have big stones like boulders, you have rocks, you have stones, pebbles, you have sand, and they are of different size, right? But value doesn't really depend on the size. So, right? Stones is a cool metaphor because you really understand that you actually need to break it into something smaller and really try to look for the value. And then you need to prioritize the value up in your backlog, not just big stones among themselves. So think of value, not the size. And to continue on that idea, then of course you need to teach everybody how to split things. I put this tweet yesterday while I was preparing for this session. That's why there are no likes or tweets or retweets and stuff. But I truly believe that PBI stands for product items of the backlog. So I believe PBI splitting is the most underdeveloped skill of software engineers, maybe after test-driven development. So splitting items into sub-items while keeping the value is not something you typically get educated in the university. So I have a computer science degrees, 6 years in the university. They never taught me how to break things vertically. They taught me product breakdown structure and all that, but they've never taught me to split stuff properly. So I'm sure Evgeny would agree with me. What we typically do with our clients, we always educate people and do workshops before the first PBR to help everybody understand what good splitting is, right? And yesterday, the guys from PandaDoc showed their like a photograph where there was a guideline on the table, lying like a PBR guideline. So I'm sure in these guidelines, they're just good ideas how to split items in the better items, right? And if you are looking for some inspiration, some years ago, I came across this SlideShare presentation from Ken McDonald, who I never met this guy. If you know him, just pass him my hello and buy him some beer. I mean, he just documented how a lot of cool ideas with cool examples, how you actually go and split the items of your backlogs from bigger to smaller. There's just some ideas from his 21 slide deck. There are probably more ideas than that. I think Gojko Adžić has a book on improving your, like, I don't know, 50 ideas how to improve your user stories, something like that. So he also documents dozens and dozens of ideas how you can go about splitting things. But that's the skill we all need to master, and nothing impedes agility worse than not be able to split bigger boulders into gems, and vice versa. Nothing improves agility, maybe after clean code, than just knowing how to split items and to extract value. So only after you break these orange ones into yellow ones, only then you can actually extract value and understand, okay, this is a part of the orange one, actually much more valuable than the orange one. So this is where the whole idea of prioritization now is possible, because you see value and you can compare value. So splitting, super important stuff. And if you like splitting, you can also try idea number 4 from this presentation, is you can try visual splitting, like a splitting at a whiteboard. Some time ago, I've experimented with this idea with one of my clients, and they had a very talented product owner, and I think we together came up with this idea that actually, well, you can visualize splitting, right? And then I brought up this article, like what if requirements are bubbles, right? And the idea was very simple. You start with what typically people call an epic, right? But it's not really an epic, it's just a black hole. Like if you send a team to work on that, they will never come back from working on the stuff because it's just a black hole. Nothing comes back. You'll never see them again on any sprint reviews. They'll just be gone, right? So you kind of take this item, draw a circle on the whiteboard, and then you kind of try to split it. It's like a mind map or something, right? And then you create these sub items, and now you see payment contains or comprises of multiple payment method, and now you can discuss, and it's a very valuable now discussion, which payment method is the most important, for which payment method we have more clarity, for which payment method, super important, we can invite someone to talk to the team and explain how this works, right? This is where you start thinking of who we can talk to, and I will mention that a little bit later in my presentation. Basically, then we went a bit ballistic, and we basically used Google, I think it was Google Jamboard, when we actually had this board digitalized, and then basically on every backlog refinement, the team would open up their board they saved in a previous PBR, and they would continue breaking things down. And then we identified that actually the size of the bubble represents the complexity or the size of the work, and the color would represent how much you know about things. And of course, then you would start working with something, like PayPal is white, so it is the opposite of the black hole. So we can start working on that. And Visa, MasterCard, they're still grayish. We need to break it down. We need to add more details. It just helps you. It's just a tool that helps you to guide your PBRs. Basically, you know what to work on now. And then we went like completely ballistic, and then we added basically the statuses of feature readiness. I'm not sure if I recommend you doing that, but using the whiteboard and rather sketch the visual breakdown or splitting of items helps me a lot to explore different ways. Because as I mentioned to you, there are like multiple ways how to go about splitting items, at least 25 ideas from this guy, which presentation I show you, but you never know what's right, what's wrong. So you need to try different ways. And if you do it at a whiteboard, you can try once, it doesn't work, you just wipe it down and you try something else. If you do splitting in JIRA or in a tool which has the format, then typically what you do, you open up a ticket, you clone the ticket, right? And then you kind of try to extract some item from the previous ticket into this one, but maybe you got the wrong splitting method. Or actually after you clone it several times, you already don't know like what's left, what's still unsplitted. So really recommend you first do it visually. And then if you want, you can move it to a digital form that works much better. You may ask why on this picture they have 3 microwaves. I have no idea. Don't ask me that question. Don't actually get me distracted from my presentation. Now, I don't know why there are 3 microwaves, but probably they needed them for some reason. There was some value in these microwaves, okay? Idea number 5. Well, again, nothing new and not so much about MultiTeam PBR, but still we're getting there. So far, the ideas I've shared, they can be easily applied to SingleTeam Scrum and to MultiTeam Scrum. We're getting closer to MultiTeam Scrum now. You all know this page, and we will know that customer collaboration is important. And unless there's this notion of a contract game happening, not really between company and external clients, but rather within an organization. You have these people we call stakeholders, right? And there is your product owner, and we are afraid to talk to the stakeholders. So we want typically in the team that product owner takes care of those scary people and to build some agreement with them. And then once there's agreement, the teams can just work with their product owner. But if the product owner talks to the stakeholders without involving the team, he would start making some commitments and some promises, and there's always like this game of bargaining. Stakeholders want more, product management or IT wants less, or vice versa, right? And it's not really a healthy game. And then at some point you agree on some like arbitrary date and arbitrary scope just to make everybody happy, and then you just go and you just work faster, right, or harder. Not really helpful. So in LeSS, we have these PBR sessions, which are an event, not just an activity, thanks God. And these PBR sessions are exactly made for the team to collaborate with the stakeholders. Let me repeat that idea if you didn't get it the first time. PBRs are the meetings where the teams, engineers, whatever we call them, should work directly with stakeholders or experts or business people, non-IT people from your or other organization, so they can learn what needs to be done. That's why these meetings are there. And let me give you some more context about how that might actually work. So when we talk about stakeholders, well, you can classify them. There's this typical 2x2 metrics, right? Some stakeholders are like super interested in your outcome, and they also have lots of influence, right? It's maybe your CEO, right? If he's not like outward looking CEO, which would be wrong, but if he also looks inside his company, that he'll be super interested and super influential. So this guy can like ruin your life or improve your life any moment, right? And we typically know how to work with these guys. So we just, invite them to sprint reviews, and we are trying to basically invite them to the strategical sessions to make sure that whatever we are doing, there's alignment, right, between our product management and the ideas in the heads of these key players. But there are other stakeholders, which are we typically call bad guys, right? People who are responsible for, compliance or something that you typically don't care about, but they do care a lot about it. So they have a lot of influence. They can actually ban your release, or they can make you redo something because it doesn't satisfy the quality gate. But on the interest scale, they don't care if you succeed or fail. They're just interested that their goals are met. And they're kind of bad guys, but it's just a role in the system. Somebody just needs to play this role, right? And there are other stakeholders which we're currently not interested in. So the bad guys, right? If there would be somebody who's responsible for security of your application, and if you're building something that is dealing with somebody's money, as a customer, I would be happy if you have somebody who's taking care of the security concerns, right? And I would really want actually the team to learn a lot from this stakeholder about his security wishes, concerns, requirement, whatever you call it. And PBR becomes a great technique, a great method, a great place and time where the team can actually invite that guy to the room and actually, okay, man, you've been sitting as requirements. We never got to actually understand. Well, let's just talk. And you'll be impressed how happy those people are to talk, because it's maybe the first time in life somebody is paying attention to what they're doing, not seeing them as a process breaker or an impediment to be removed, but rather as someone who has something valuable to share. And it works also the other way around. These people also understand that teams actually care about this stuff, and they're really interested to implement those maybe non-functional requirements, right? NFRs. And PBRs are just exactly the time and place where these people should meet and talk. And then, of course, that guy would be very interested to attend your sprint review, because he knows that next sprint you will be starting working on his security thing, and then he'll be the best person to talk to and the best guy to give you feedback. And that's how actually that whole thing starts. Now you might ask, okay, but there's a product owner, right, and there's stakeholders. If the team talks too much to the stakeholders or to the clients or the experts, how product owner is not losing the focus. And it's a classical dilemma. It actually comes from misunderstanding the role of the product owner. And the more you go into the scaled Scrum, the less of a dilemma you think it is. It actually false dichotomy, right? It's not that either or, it's actually both. You can still be focusing on the strategy, and there still can be some good alignment on the details. But rather, if we're talking about the scaling role of the product owner, then actually product owner in LeSS tends to become more and more strategic. And all the details clarification and requirement is being delegated to the teams, and then the teams then are responsible to sit with that guys and actually learn from them. But then the question is, okay, how product owner is not losing the grip and how she's not losing control when the teams are in direct contact with calls and experts. And maybe they will be losing some of the control, but maybe that's also good, right? Because this is kind of decentralization of the process. The more people are involved, the more people are in control, the better is the control. So what I recommend typically doing, this idea number 6 of this presentation, and I'm checking my time, I think I'm good with time. Our product owner, and product owner uses his time at every PBR, actually at every occasion, to remind everybody about the bigger picture, about the bigger thing, right? Otherwise, people will be lost and bogged down in the details. You probably know this picture from the Dali Museum, right? You're looking at the pieces, they look like some weird stuff, but when you're looking at them all together, well, they remind you of a face, right? So product owner should actually stay at a higher level and remind everybody about the bigger picture and how the pieces fit together. And only when people understand how pieces fit together, then they can have discussions with their stakeholders, experts, like other people in the company with some requirements or with some ideas. And you will make sure by doing that, there is some alignment on the strategy, and people will not get lost by talking to the stakeholders because they still remember the bigger picture. So your PBRs, multi-team PBRs can work like that. Step 1, right? Bigger picture. A product owner jumps onto the stage, onto the table, whatever you have, and explains 10 minutes where we are, like in which release we are, what are the goals, why are we doing this, keeping reminding everybody on the goal. Then maybe step 2, stakeholders jump on the stage and they pitch the ideas. Okay, I'm a stakeholder from the security department. Well, we actually want you guys to implement this, etc., etc. And then it actually helps people, the teams later on, to know to which stakeholder to talk to and why, because they've heard these short pitches. And then Scrum Masters facilitate mixing of the groups, right? The good idea that I think is one of the guides in LeSS is that if you do a multi-team PBR, you don't just go with existing teams, but you rather shuffle teams into temporary groups just for this meeting. So in every new group, there will be people from all the teams, right? First of all, it's cool to meet and work with new people, right? Second of all, well, this group contains of people from every team, hopefully, right? So when they're talking to a stakeholder, it actually now every teams are insourcing some information from that stakeholder, and that creates the freedom and flexibility for now any team basically to work on that particular item in the backlog. So in this step 3, you would create these groups, and step number 4, actually these groups will go and learn from the stakeholders, and this is where the PBR actually starts. But I would rather follow the steps, and I've heard guys from PandaDoc are using something similar. I'm sure they can tell more when I'm done. And then idea number 7, I mentioned that before, but I'd like to give a bit more meat to it, right? Try facilitating PBRs as interactive workshops. Plugging computer and beaming JIRA onto the wall is not an interactive workshop. It's not, I'm sorry. So I figured there are 2 styles of that workshop that works pretty well. I'm sure there are many, but let's focus on these 2 ones because they are slightly different, right? World Cafe style works like this. You set up stations like corners of a large hall, for example, right? Each station will have a table and a flip chart. And now if you are in a virtual environment, it's just basically different parts of your big mirror board, right? But basically these are these stations. And each station gets a stakeholder or an expert and a topic. And then you have these groups of people from different teams, right? You have these multiple groups, and these groups actually rotate and talk to every stakeholder one at a time. And like every 12 to 20 minutes, somebody makes signal and the teams rotate and now go and talk and learn from the new stakeholder. And whatever the previous teams have been discussing, it gets like growing into an artifact, like a bubble diagram of your requirements or more details or specification by example, whatever technique you are using. In the end of this exercise, actually everyone knows about all the things, but in some details, right? Because you spend like maybe 12 minutes at each station, you know about every requirement, but maybe not in many details, but you have this cool flexibility. Actually, any team can start basically working on any requirement, more or less, if they are really cross-component and stuff. The open space technique is a bit different. You also have these different sessions, right? Not stations, but sessions. They can be different rooms, or can be different parts or corners of your larger room, or can be different parts on your mirror board. And then there's a topic per session. And sessions are a bit longer, I don't know, like 40, 60 minutes. Probably it's something for the group to go deeper in this topic. And now that's the difference to the World Cafe. In the World Cafe, everybody would go through all the stations. In open space, the group decides which session they attend. And apparently, you probably don't have time for all the groups to go and talk to every stakeholder. So now, by the end of this exercise, by the end of this PBR, there's only some people who know about some topics, but because they spend up to an hour on that topic with that stakeholder, they know a lot about that topic, right? So depending what you want to achieve, like a broader understanding, you go World Cafe. More deep understanding, you go open space. You can actually combine these techniques also. If you are just trying MultiTeam PBR, you haven't done that before, I would probably go World Cafe, because you typically have what is called organizational debt. So because people haven't done that, they haven't talked to each other, they need to learn a lot, which they haven't known before. So you probably want everybody to learn more, and then World Cafe style is a better option. But then as you learn how to do it, maybe in the end, you will figure out there are some teams that need to go deep into one specific topic. All right, I'm just taking my time. Both techniques are good. Last idea for today. Yeah, that's something new. That's something emerging in the Agile space. The outcome-based backlogs, right? We focus a lot on the features, right? You can think of your backlogs. What do you have there? Typically, you would have their features, right? Features, ideas of the product, something that needs to be built, right? And when you do new PBR, the focus is on the features, and discussions are about scope, estimate, schedule. Can we do it? Can we pack more features into our sprint release or whatever? Can we work faster? It's all about that. And it sounds like bargaining to me, because it's a kind of a zero-sum game. Somebody loses, somebody wins. It's not really the agile that we've been driven off, right? It's still the same kind of boring game of making people do more work, because, well, features have some certain scope and it's kind of fixed. If there's still some flexibility, it's kind of still fixed, right? So there's a limit how many features you can fit in a release. And if your stakeholders are super hungry for more features, there will be just more pressure on the team, right? Another idea is to focus on impact on the outcome. Again, nothing new here, and you probably heard of impact mapping and all that, but lots of people heard about impact mapping, but they still have feature-based, feature-driven backlogs. But if you're able to have an outcome-driven backlog, then the focus will be on user behavior and metrics you really want to move and change. And then the discussion will not be about features and scope and the bells and whistles, but it will be about something interesting, right? Like, how can we make that impact? How can we increase or minimize that a trend, right? How can we make people do something with our product, right? If you wanted to have more activity of users in your product, how can we go about it? And here, like, basically the sky is the limit. You can really be really creative, right? So I believe the impact-driven PBRs and impact-driven backlog, they are pretty good, actually, environments that foster creativity. And in the end, actually, they tend to be places where people actually are better at managing scope, right? So in the feature-driven world, it's kind of a bit boring and in the limits creativity. In the impact world, actually, people are more engaged. You get more creativity out, so which hopefully means you have a cooler solution also. But also, because you're not fixed with some ideas right around, you tend to be better at managing scope, which is surprising because you are not actually discussing scope. At some point, after you discuss the impact, you still end up actually discussing some features, right? But I'd rather want the team to go from impact and users and behaviors and metrics down to features, rather than to be given features by somebody who is an amateur in the product design, right? Jurgen Desmet, a speaker at our conference, he has an interesting talk on YouTube about outcome-driven backlogs. I recommend you guys watching that one. This is a new thing that is emerging, and I really would like to encourage you to experiment with that. I would like to hear how guys from Panda approaching that. And that was me, Learn to Learn with multi-team product backlog refinement, 10 or actually just 8 ideas to add more life to your PBRs. And I will switch off the slides and see how the world outside looks like.
Hello, Alexey.
People see here, we have 42 participants. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm promoting Mick, and
we
I promoted Tiana. So we have a lot of questions. Actually, you have a time to read them. Hello. and to think how to answer to them, Alexey, because questions are tricky. So, guys, thank you for the great holy war in the chat regarding the hierarchy of.
About my haircut, or
about your haircut. Yeah. About the hierarchy of requirements. That was really cool.
Well, I knew it would come.
I believe all of you remember Mick from yesterday. He is the director of engineering in PandaDoc. And we have Tatiana, Tanya, she is the engineering manager in PandaDoc. Wow. And today, you asked yesterday about the refinement session, right? Guys making in PandaDoc. We promised to you to tell you. And we have a very small presentation. I will present a couple of slides to explain more how we actually made the initial PBR, and then I will give a stage to guys. They will share the learning of the PBIs for about half a year, so they can share the real world example how they are doing this. Okay. Looks like okay. So let me share the screen. I will be pretty fast actually in my talk, because you promised yesterday half an hour you will speak, Alexey, but you took more time. So we will try to be as fast as possible. I believe you all can see my screen, and you should remember yesterday I spoke about the product backlog refinement, the initial one we run. So I just want to remind where it starts and stop on very specific points of this, right? So you remember Alexey presented in his presentation that everyone needs to learn how to make the product backlog refinement. And actually, that's where we started. You see the slides is actually like business rules. It's written here. This 21 user story splitting approach is printed. That was a kind of the thing we gave to guys just to train themselves in decomposition. We made a lot of rounds of small decompositions for different backlogs just to train. And the next day, as far as I remember, we had the real product backlog refinement. And on real product backlog refinement, that was the handover for the group. So there was the facilitation guide, and I will show this guide in a second. And there was the printed different options how you can split the user stories, so they can facilitate the splitting event like more precise. So actually, after this education event, we developed this. This is the product backlog refinement guide. So this guide is actually look like this. Let me open this file. So it's actually the simple Word document that we printed on a printer. There was the definition of done and definition of ready in it. I actually remove it. I don't remember why I remove it from here, but it actually was definition of done and definition of ready at the top of the backlog, and then step-by-step facilitation guide for backlog refinement. So step one, they have to define the facilitator. So someone need to facilitate the session and be neutral. And there should be some node keeper, maybe someone who helping organize the nodes. So then the responsible product manager, and wherever you see the PM in our presentations today, that means product manager. It's very important. So responsible product manager, that's the subject matter expert about this feature, is actually presenting the scope of the feature epic, discuss it with teams, having the question and answer. Then actually in the step 3, they're making the split using the approach Alexey described. So we suggest to make it on sticker on table, and that's like very easy to reproduce in Miro online or whatever other tool you are using for visualization process. So you can just you just start and decomposing the elements and build the mind map of your backlog. Let's say like this. What we also do, there was some features that's previously been started in the old life of the company, how to say, and we asked guys to refine all the features as a new features. So start refinement from scratch. Why we made this? Because we had a kind of thought that it might be a lot of undone work even in almost finished features. So wherever they split, they have to check how it's actually match the definition of done criteria. If it doesn't match the definition of done criteria, they have to create the item for this particular undone work. So on the step 4, they verify the elements and like move, like verify the elements, check if they're done. If something is not done, they create the element. And let's say 5, they use this small approach for splitting the user story. How it looks like, it's actually for each element on the table, you ask yourself, is it small enough to work on? So we limited teams to 1/3 of team velocity. So it should be 3 days in end-to-end development according to definition of that. Actually, after that, they split. If it's proper size, it's make it feasible. If it's not proper size, they split it more. And at the end of the product backlog refinement, they have to have everything in JIRA. Unfortunately, we use JIRA. We can love it or don't love it. We use JIRA. We even use epics. Haha, Alexey.
You need to zoom in.
Huh?
People asking you to zoom in.
I will share this document for you guys. There is no secrets in it. I will just shoot it in the chat in a second so you can review it. And what's the definition of done for product backlog refinement? Epic is split to user stories. User stories meet definition of ready. User stories size is no more than 1/3 of the sprint size, end-to-end to definition of done. All undone items are noted in JIRA. Everything that's been discussed is actually in JIRA. So we made the open space for this, and you can easily replicate the open space in Miro by like giving the place the room in, for example, in Zoom or the room in Google Hangout or wherever you discuss. So it's actually we move everything to one board, and there was a different type of elements we refined. There was the features, there was the technical elements, and there was the defects. So we also reviewed a lot of the defects, and it was the special refinement session for defects review. There was the technical stuff like PDF. There was the technical owner of this feature, and he refined it with guys. There was the business features. That's more or less everything I want to say about the overall PBR. I would like to stop sharing and given a chance to speak to Tanya and Mick. Guys, feel free to start.
Hi guys. Hopefully our experience will help you improve your process of PBR in your companies. So I will share my screen to you, and I will start probably with the problems we faced when we were continuing refining our items, and we were improving our process a lot. The main problems we faced, we've divided into two directions. First of all, it's PBR process itself and the outcome we've got after it. Because items we've got in our backlog did not fit into any kind of part of the sprint. It took more than 3 days to finish the story, and so on. There was a lack of description. There were some corner cases we've faced during the development cycle. And the hardest thing we've faced when we were doing PBRs, that our engineers were not involved in this process. They refused to. There was a lot of resistance when we get to, splitting the items and describing those items in JIRA, because we had no experience. We've never done that in our lives before. So of course, when you don't know how to do something, you just don't want to do it, and you don't involve in this process. We've had a lot of iterations, and our process looks like this today. First thing to say here, that PBR in PandaDoc, it's not a meeting or workshop, it's a process. It starts when our product team or engineering team makes a decision that we are good to go with the feature and we are ready to invest some time into it. It means that we involve our cross-functional teams and building the solution for the feature or the problem. So cross-functional teams work side by side with product manager or feature owner. It could be engineering manager with technical task, or so on. So we work with the teams on product solution, designs, our text, our UX, our touch solution, and then we document everything in Epic. Yeah, sorry. And then we split our epics into user stories, describe them, validate that in the group, and put those items into backlog. So the next thing we do, how we plan this. Yeah, we have overall PBR sessions scheduled each sprint, where our product team or feature owners bring the list of features. They give brief presentation of this feature, focusing mostly on the value that this feature brings to our customers and metrics this feature influence, like, I don't know, NPS score or retention, or I don't know, our growth, something like this. We do that to engage our teams, and sometimes our teams even fight for those features because they want to participate, they want to bring value to our customers. And during the overall PBR, teams make decision where they want or not to continue with this feature. So we spread those features to different teams. And we focus here on feature size and approximate start of the development. So we help our teams make the decision whether they should take it onto SingleTeam PBR or MultiTeam PBR. What it means, when the feature is small and suitable for one team only, we suggest to take it into SingleTeam PBR. If feature is large or dev time is uncertain, we don't know when we're going to develop it, we suggest MultiTeam PBR to include more teams into it, just to keep the agility and make sure that those teams which were involved into product backlog refinement take this feature into development cycle. So it's kind of like this, yeah, short presentation and decision making. So then we go into our single team PBRs or multi-team PBRs. Here, what should I tell you? The process itself and steps of the PBR are mostly the same for the single team or multi-team PBR whatsoever. But what is the difference is the scale. So what we do on those sessions, like it takes us not one meeting, a couple of it. So the stages of our PBR looks following. First thing, you need to do the kickoff meeting where you dive into the feature. Product manager gives more information, you ask questions, you decide whether their investigation is needed or consultation with our architecture committee and creation of high-level design or ADR or POC or something like this. Then, when all questions are asked and all investigation is completed, we dive into decomposition. So we do that simply like this. If it's multi-team PBR, it's simple similar to World Cafe. So we split big feature into smaller items. We mix our team into groups. Those groups work on this smaller part. Our facilitator, product manager, architecture gate representative or experts rotate between groups, answer the questions, help teams to clarify something. After this job is done, we gather together and refine those things that we've accomplished. So we revise the decomposition, challenge that, add description, and put items into backlog. So that's pretty it. That's our process. So maybe you have questions here.
There's a question, what's the average time for PBI, for PBI to go through the PBR process and to become ready? Like how much time it takes for?
It depends on the feature. Sometimes it takes 1 or 2 meetings and that's it, if it is a small thing.
Mick has already replied in the chat.
Yeah. I will answer while we were talking.
Yeah. So feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
Just guys, for the time thing, if you can finish like under 15 minutes, then I think we are good.
One question I have from my side. Is it possible to share this presentation to the broader audience, or this presentation you have with your beautiful drawings is somehow hidden? So can we share it? Is there any?
Yeah, I will just change the settings to share it with everyone.
Yeah, and
okay.
Could you please send the link for us so we can give it? It's a very nice process.
All right. Mick, you have also prepared something to share from yesterday?
No. I just brought in Tatiana. She's the lady behind all the PBRs in the company. She's the expert here.
Yeah. So what you take? So there's this long discussion in our chat currently about epics, how evil or useful they are, and I know it's a questionable topic, right? That's why actually I brought in. What is your take on that?
Like,
and I'm sure there's not right or wrong. It's just like, what's your opinion? Like how you use that?
Yeah, we like perceive it with the same like cautiousness, because it's a really controversial thing. Like I think 2 weeks ago we had a really long discussion with our product guys, product managers, just to figure out what web epic is, because like a lot of people understand it differently. So our common ground here that we figured out is the epic is just a feature. So usually we bring epics, so features, to the process of the backlog refinement, and during the refinement we'd split it into the simpler stories or some tasks. So for us it's a input of the PBR, so it's the starting point, and it can end up is just like one story epic if it's small, and that's it. So sometimes we just skip it, but as our mental model, we perceive it as a something with a considerably high value for our customers. So like any PBI is an epic. We just sometimes bypass it.
The question is, are you removing epics after splitting?
Sometimes we should improve our like JIRA hygiene. So usually when we try to do some measurements on the like epic cycle time, something like this, when we do this, first thing we do, we like start to move every epics to the right state. So like we should do this, but for now we are not very good at it, because like it's the only value in it that we see is just getting the measurements.